I've been around the Liberal Party an awfully long time, as you all know, and I've never seen a caucus as strong and united in our approach and our values.
Prime Minister Justin Trudeau speaking to reporters outside a rare Saturday caucus meeting. One big talking point, how to sell a budget that many found wanting when it was released this week. That's where we begin this week's Sunday Scrum. Joining me today from Ottawa, freelance columnist Susan Riley. Good morning, Susan.
Good morning, Carol.
John Ibbotson of the Globe and Mail. Good morning, John.
Hi, Carol.
And Katie O'Malley of iPolitics. Good morning, Katie.
Good morning.
Katie, let me start with you. Is there division behind the scenes? Is it still sunny ways?
I think division, we're not quite at a sort of outright mutiny yet, but yeah, I think there's definitely a sense of, let's call it restlessness, and maybe what could really easily turn into some nervousness on the part of some Liberal backbenchers, which isn't entirely unusual at this point in a mandate. We're basically approaching the sort of 2-year mark. So these are MPs that have had to go back to the riding and have people sort of meaningfully pointing at their watches and saying, hey, what about that stuff you were going to do on legalizing pot or electoral reform, or, you know, what about this budget? It was kind of meh. When are we going to see all this stuff we voted for you to do? And I think that some of that is kind of starting to accumulate, shall we say, in the sort of the mood of the caucus. And that we saw coming out this week. There were some not super thrilled faces on the expressions on the faces of Liberal MPs, especially those who aren't in cabinet and who are kind of idling about serving as human backdrops.
Yeah. John, what do you think?
Yeah, look, it's a stand-pat budget, and that shouldn't surprise anyone. We're halfway, basically, into the mandate. You had a great big budget last year that implemented many of the key promises of the election platform. And you know that as you get close to the election in 2019, there'll be new big things that the Liberals will lay out in order to, create a platform for that election. But right now, it's kind of stay the course. But there are two problems. The one is the first budget had all these huge spending commitments for infrastructure. Where is the infrastructure? The process is ongoing, but people haven't got really anything to see. And secondly, the budget used inappropriate language in that it claimed to be all about innovation. It claimed to be an exciting, powerful budget that was going to jumpstart the Canadian economy and improve productivity. And then when you read it, you realize that innovation is, funding for international tourism promotion and stuff like that. So the results of the budget didn't match up with the actual language that was being used. And at the end of the day, you had a bunch of reporters stuck in a budget lockup for 8 hours, realizing after about 30 minutes that there was nothing to write about. So they got into a bad mood.
Let me ask you about that, because I talked to CFAR yesterday, a group that's responsible, that got a good chunk of the innovation money. There's $125 million for a pan-AI strategy, $50 million to teach children how to code, because there's a huge inequality in this country when it comes to who's learning coding and robotics. There's in all about $1 billion assigned to the innovation budget, to the tech world. A lot of people in that world very happy with this budget, John.
Yeah, and there were people, we had that in the Globe as well on Budget Day. There were people who were happy with the kind of money that was being spent. But it's a $20 billion deficit this year. So where did the other $19 billion go? If you actually did believe there was serious money for innovation, $1 billion isn't actually an awful lot given the size of the Canadian economy. And we are now in a situation where the government is running structural $20 billion deficits year after year after year with no intention whatsoever to eliminate those deficits. And it's a reasonable thing for someone to say, well, just what is all this money being spent on?
Okay, here's some of the choice words. I'm going to bring it to you, Susan, in just a moment. Some choice words around this budget. One commentator, Andrew Coyne, said it was mind-bendingly empty. Quebec's Treasury Board president said he was extremely disappointed. Manitoba Premier Brian Pallister said he's not displeased. Susan.
Well, Justin Trudeau, when he's in a room, he can charm the leg off a stool. I mean, I've been in rooms with Justin Trudeau, and you can get quite captivated by what he's saying. And then you look at your notebook after and you realize there's nothing there. He didn't say anything. He can get away with it. A lot of his MPs are going to have more trouble selling what is a very insubstantial budget, what is in fact an aspirational document more than a financial document almost. They're going to have a lot more trouble than he will selling it to skeptical constituents. I think one of the big disappointments is this long, hoary promise of the Liberals for childcare support. That's their constituency, mums and dads, middle class mums and dads. And this budget, again, maybe there'll be 40,000 more spaces, if the provinces all agree, 40,000 more spaces in a country that needs 500,000 spaces for, for starters. So things like that are very challenging, I would say, for average MPs to sell. Number two, you do accumulate errors and problems over time. I thought that for example, the government's handling of the illegal border crossings has been very evasive. I think there are concerns about it. They're not founded. I think the government, by the way, is right not to panic about it, but they haven't explained it very well. The Liberal MPs have to go back to their writings and they have to explain it. And I don't think they've been given very good arguments. So I think it's creating a kind of nervousness, not rebellion, not bitterness, but a real nervousness.
It does seem like this is budget part one, and part two will come after the American president either succeeds or fails on tax reform, including possible border tax and a huge reduction in corporate taxes that will be watched here. At least that's what the U.S. president is saying now. But after what we saw in health reform and an apparent split in his own party in the United States, wasn't Bill Morneau right not to make commitments until he sees what actually happens? Katie.
Yeah, I think that's going to be, generally speaking, the approach of the government on all issues related to the United States, which is, of course, pretty much everything, is you can never be sure at any given moment if what the President of the United States says he's going to do or wants to do is either going to come to fruition or if he's even going to still want to do it 2 days from now. So it does make it very difficult when you're trying to kind of anticipate it. And in that sense, yeah, it definitely made sense to, rather than come out with sort of a whole year's worth of fiscal planning, come up with your sort of starter, get things going with an eye on, if necessary, you have a fairly substantial fiscal update in the fall, at which point you could bring in tax changes and other major sort of responses to what's going on in the U.S. But yeah, and I'm sure that Canada isn't the only government facing this sort of conundrum, you cannot react to everything that seems to be happening in the United States on any given day, because there's a 50-50 chance it's not going to be happening 2 days from now, and something totally different might be sort of dominating the dialogue and the public arena. So in that sense, you got to be nimble and you can't react too quickly, or you might be reacting to something that's just not going to happen. All
right. John, do you think that Bill Morneau deserves a break on this?
On that front, absolutely. I've had nothing but praise for this government in how it's responded to the trauma of Donald Trump's presidency, because they realized that this government could ultimately be judged on how it responds to that presidency. And so far, they've kept the lines of communication open. They've basically moved a chunk of cabinet and Prime Minister's office and Privy Council office down to Washington or to New York. They seem to be there 24/7, liaising with Congress and the administration. But there's good news on the Keystone XL pipeline, but there's bad news on softwood lumber. There's bad news on the NAFTA renegotiations. And the really huge news is, what will Donald Trump do on tax reform? Will he lower business and corporate taxes to the point where our taxes become uncompetitive? Will he impose some kind of import tax on the border, which could be devastating to Canadian manufacturers and exporters? And if so, how will the Trudeau government respond to it? I think that in the end, Justin Trudeau is going to run on 2019 on how he has handled the Trump file, and he will be elected or defeated possibly on the basis of that.
Susan?
The confusion in the States has also created some opportunities for Canada, though. One of them is poaching high-tech people, well-educated high-tech people from the global community who are now less welcome, who have now got more obstacles before they get placements in the States, bringing them up here. And some, to their credit, some universities have already acted on that. So there are opportunities, but here's the problem, and note to Kevin O'Leary. You can't run a government the way you run a business. And the so-called innovation agenda in this budget is a perfect example of this. yes, it is money, as you point out, for AI and other things, but it's sprinkled all over. If you're a company and you decide electric vehicles are the way to go, for example, you focus all your attention and your resources on wherever it's going to be that you're going to be developing and manufacturing this product. You forget everybody else. You lay off people in the rest of the country. When you're a government, you can't do that. So this innovation money is sprinkled around the country to different centers of excellence, and dissipated. There simply isn't enough money in the budget. Canada's not a big enough or a rich enough country to make the kind of investments that are going to pay off. So that's a conundrum.
Yeah, and also what's coming down the pike when the technological shift really gets going, when it exponentially changes, and what kind of labor disruption that's going to have and how the government's going to handle that. That is a conversation for another day. I want to get our audience involved in this debate, so tweet me at Carol McNeil. Remember to use the hashtag #SundayScrum. We'll do our best to put your thoughts and questions to our panelists later on. Here's a head start. How should the Prime Minister deal with one of his MPs accused of hurling a sexist comment at a Conservative MP? And we'll ask this question: are Canadians too easily offended? A Liberal MP from Quebec in hot water over a comment overheard on Parliament Hill. The story involves a room full of MPs, a ringtone, and a stripper pole. But it's no joke now, and the Prime Minister is dragged into the fray. Hear the ringtone in question and what Justin Trudeau had to say about the situation next. Coming up on CBC News Network Sunday Scrum.